Welcome to Upside. I'm Dan Bowyer. I'm at SuperSeed, where we back early stage technical founders who are transforming how the world works. Today, I'm also joined by Ferdy from SuperSeed, as well as Lomax from Outsized. And today, we're going to talk about all things European startup, investing, VC, all of that cool stuff. Focusing on Europe, although looking at the docket, a lot of it is very American focused. No great, you know, surprise there with the Trump inauguration and everything that's going on over there, which will affect us in Europe.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
What are we going to talk about today? Let me just scooch through the docket, gents. We're going to talk about OpenAI. We're going to talk about Operator at OpenAI. We're going to talk about some job cuts at Meta and what that really means behind the scenes. We've got a bit of moves at the CMA, which is the competition regulator in the UK, and what that also means. Airport expansion, there looks like there's going to be some growth and obviously some more GDP per cap coming through from that if it all comes off, if the government can get it through. Is M&A in Europe back? The Trump piece, I think we can meander around in that. I think there's a lot of topics in that. I know Lomax, you wanted to go into that, and also Doge, and then the Stargate AI project, if I can get my words out. So that's what's on the docket. Now, starting at the very, very, very top, it looks like we've got our first, if you like, true AI agent, which is a toolkit called Operator from ChatGPT from OpenAI, which is only in their premium package. And it's effectively a browser within a browser that will allow you to take full control and properly act like an agent. Now, we can't get access in Europe, but I did get access via a VPN. And I think this is going to be the kickoff as to where agents are going to head this year. Now, Lomax, have you played with it? Have you played with any other agents in their truest form?
Haven't played with it. Been reading some initial reviews. Some disappointment. Like the full range of people fully excited, for people already disappointed. I mean, how was your experience?
I only went through the demo, so I did. Just to be completely open, we were playing it. We're in a truck. We're heading to Ukraine, dropping off trucks. So
tell us where you are, guys. Come on.
So Ferdy and I are driving trucks to drop off some cars, trucks, and bits and pieces for all the fighters on the front line in Ukraine to support the cause. Now, we were running the docket and I was playing with Operator and doing all the stuff for the pod this afternoon, doing a solid 65 miles per hour somewhere through Poland. So if I don't make much sense, that's probably why, because we've been driving for 14 hours and Ferdy's looking at me quizzically. So his face
I just think it's important to clarify. It's important to clarify that you weren't driving at 65 miles an hour while preparing the content for today. Mercifully, that was my job.
Thank you. That good call. I wasn't driving. Ferdy was driving wonderfully, and I was busy in the docket and playing with toolkits like Notebook LLM, and obviously Operator. So no, I haven't really fully played with it in anger because we're only on 5G. But it looks like this is the bit that excites me, because this is the bit that I think is going to make the real difference as to how we live, work, and play. So a browser within a browser, which can take full function of the browser. So you can say, find me, a holiday, book the hotel, book the flights, and the LLM will naturally work through the entire workflow. And I think this is where pure agents are going to go. You play with any agents, proper agents?
I have played with some agents, and of course we have a very valuable and very useful point-specific solution, which I guess is an AI agent in our portfolio in the guise of POB, and they're obviously incredibly effective. And
So I think recruitment co, always they do. Just give it a little bit of background.
Yeah, sorry for people's context. For anybody who doesn't know, POP is a sort of end-to-end automated recruitment platform that handles, candidate evaluation all the way through candidate conversation and screening, and eventually presents a very well qualified shortlist of, would-be candidates for a role, but well-screened candidates for a role to hiring managers. So rather than screening 1,000, you're screening 3, and they're all very high quality. So that's a really simple example of an AI agent working well. I think I remember about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when there was a sort of massive explosion of these sort of, I think then they were referred to as agentic workflows, but certainly agents became pretty buzzy as a term. And our contention always was that, they always seemed a little bit sort of trivial, right? A little bit sort of meaningless. And their output was really what mattered, and nobody had really managed to deliver something either specific and valuable enough as a point solution, or holistic enough that it could sort of run its own stuff. But it feels like this is the first major step in the direction of having, fully autonomous AI-driven agents kind of, installed in our day-to-day life in a way that we have never really had before. So it's very exciting.
I think you're right. I think this is the first full autonomous agent, which will obviously have massive implications in business as well as for our personal lives. And as I've mentioned before in previous pods, I think this is where Apple is going to come into its own, because they own the entire ecosystem and all the app connectivity. I think this is where, if they get it right.
You're so big on that, Dan. You're so big on that.
Oh, I know I'm a bit of a broken record on this, but there's something about the fact they own that closed ecosystem and having their integration with OpenAI. If Tim Cook, not even accounting to do a creative job, and obviously everything else is tanking, but if they can pull this off, this is going to be massive in the consumer space.
They also have a pretty amazing track record of introducing disruptive technologies in a way that make people clamor for them rather than feel uncomfortable about them. And they have, exactly as you say, they have this ecosystem of tied up, bought in consumers, as you are, living evidence of. And they have a very you are an Apple fanboy. You're an example of how captive their market is, and that's exactly why they're in such a dominant position to introduce something like this and let it take off. I'm really excited for it too, by the way, because I do so many menial things on a day-to-day basis that I'd like not to do.
No, I think it's great. Lomax, I know this is only supposed to be a quickie, but anything else from you on agents or operating specifically?
No, other than I think we should go and do a lot of homework on this over the next week and report back, next Friday.
No, let's go play. Staying with AI, and the reason I say that I'm staying with AI, I'm talking about Meta and job cuts, because the backstory here is that Meta quite famously have just cut 5% of their workforce, like they did last year. There's another 3,600 jobs being taken out. And the explicit message from Zuck is we're going to get the cream of the crop, and we're going to let go of the dead wood, and we're going to keep this premium workforce, 72,000, I think, at Meta in total, doing amazing things. But my sense is that this is an AI push, and actually this is one of the first and most famous examples of AI now starting to take people's jobs, which I know is on all of our minds a lot of the time, and how that's going to roll out through different industries, and how organizations of any size are going to start handling what AI can and can't do, and what AI will and won't do, and what it will replace. But my sense is this is just an AI efficiency push where more of the stack is being built automatically, and they need fewer people. You could argue there's some DEI after Trump's, let's not do anything nice for anybody, and DEI is to be killed and culled. This could be the DEI and sustainability and all the other crews in Meta also going. But my take for the floor is that this is the beginning of a path we're going to see for many other organizations of many other sizes. Lomax, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's right. I still think I think a lot of those big tech companies are still like at the back end of cleaning out the bloat that arose, in those companies in the teens, right? 2017, 18, 19, right? Where they were famously hiring. I know they had big cuts since then, announced, probably 2 years ago now. I still think we're still at the back end of that. Clearly the fact checkers are all gone or going in the US, right? But I guess that's sort of separate to this. And I think you're totally right. I think this is an example where the workforce can be rendered more efficient through AI tools, and that will mean that engineering teams, ironically, with more and more of dev work being automated, will feel the punch a bit. Look, Klarna, which is Klarna went through this 6 months ago, right? And
didn't they allow 15%? Was it 15% of their workforce?
I think it
And
was
they- but
15, yeah.
But he explicitly said, we are not going to rehire, whereas Zucker said, we are going to backfill. Whereas the Klarna CEO, I can't remember his name, actually said, we're not, but this is an AI push. I think he was quite candid about it, if memory serves. Is that right?
Yeah, and well, also, I mean, Benioff came out and said he's making no more dev hires this year, right? It's a hiring freeze, effectively, right? Which I guess, with natural attrition will mean a reduced headcount. So I think, big tech is experimenting here. I think it makes sense. It's probably the tip of the iceberg. Could well be. Could just be at the beginning.
I think it's super interesting for us in our position. I mean, as all of us, I'm sure, experience quite regularly, there is a contentious, flip side to the coin of the sort of AI productivity boost, which is that the only real saving comes from FTE shaving, right? It's like reducing number of headcount is the only really meaningful way that you generate the uplift that AI promises. And it's always been a little bit of a, contentious topic. And actually, the other side of this is that usually, historically, when companies have announced large numbers of job cuts, it's typically been a bit of a death knell or a warning signal or some signifier of underperformance or certainly deviation from expected performance. I wonder whether this is actually going to be, this is going to sort of introduce a new paradigm where reduction of jobs actually shows disproportionate talent in your engineering performance because you're able to reduce headcount effectively while also obtaining impressive metrics. I think it is going to be a very interesting period for these big companies as they start to streamline.
It's an interesting kind of counter circular position where everything is going to be back into growth with Trump's sugar high, I imagine, for the at least H1 and markets. I think the S&P has had its best opening January since Reagan. So it feels like obviously Zuck snuck this news in with all of the other big news that was going on. So I also know that this will be tomorrow's chip paper if it isn't already. But it feels quite odd, letting people go as the market is looking to boom. However, let's go back to the UK. So the CMA chair. So the CMA is the competition regulator in the UK. So the CMA chair, Marcus Bockering, is out, and they've replaced him, albeit temporarily, but this might be a permanent fixture, with Doug Gurr. Now, he's ex-Amazon. So Marcus was very consultancy backgroundy, and Doug is a commercial guy. So it feels like, and there's a bit of unrest at the mill, but it feels like this is government saying we need to get more commercial people and less red tape and more activity. So that's what I'm reading between the lines. Lomax, you got any thoughts on this?
No, I think that's right. I think we're seeing that in the US now. We talked about this one or two pods ago, I think the FTC will have its wings clipped massively and will be, disencouraged from the, I would say, what Trump would call kind of regulatory overreach that they've gone through in the last few years. So I think this is actually an example. I mean, we talked at the beginning of the pod where you said we've got a lot of US stuff, but what happens in the US is relevant for us often, right? And this is an example of us kind of following suit, as it were. If you wanna encourage growth, moving red tape, moving barriers to M&A, et cetera, is incredibly important. And, I think Rachel Reeves has not been doing a great job. I mean, still early days, but, this is just one of the kind of early moves that she can structurally at the establishment level start to make changes that will percolate through the economy in the next 3-5 years.
Yeah, I think that's right. Ferds, you got any thoughts on this?
No, only really that it feels like a sort of slightly pale imitation of what's happening in the States, right? With this sort of
across many vectors, it feels like every time I see an American headline like this, like something going on at the EPA or at the Fed or an institution X, and it feels like there's an equivalent European story. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
There's an equivalent European story, but as Ferdy says, it's a little bit more watered down and a little bit more lackluster and a little bit less inspiring.
I don't think
that's always the way, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't think this would make the front page in the States somehow, right? This isn't quite as illustrious a story as Doge, right? And by that I don't mean the coin. I mean the committee. But
yeah. And also, I mean, I guess this would also come into play with Stargate, which we're going to talk about later, which is we have the UK equivalent of what they want to do with the AI infrastructure and get Matt Clifford's project off the ramp. But again, to your point, Lomax, that it pales into massive insignificance when you've got a $500 billion, private public contribution going on from NASA into the US, into AI infrastructure. We'll come on to that later. Staying with the UK. So listen, airports, expansions, the whole topic of getting Gatwick, I think it was Gatwick, Luton and Heathrow to expand their capacity. And this one is all about Heathrow. So just some context. Research suggests that between 47 billion to 143 billion could be added to the UK economy by 2060, adding 27,000 jobs. Now, this is obviously mainly a southern thing. Obviously, Heathrow, Gatwick, Luton are all in the south of the UK, which is slightly problematic, but that's where the main hubs are. So ministers are set to push for a third runway at Heathrow shortly. And it feels like this is another one of those kind of government pushes, get more activity, go for growth. So again, I think this is going to be a short conversation, but does anybody, Lomax, do you know any more on this?
Well, no, I mean, other than having an opinion, which is, I think, the expansion of Gatwick and Luton is probably a bit of a no-brainer. It's easier to do. It's probably it's more incremental in terms of like overall numbers, but it's just easier and quicker to get done. From the few people I've spoken to, I don't even know if Heathrow want to invest this much and actually do it. I'm not even sure the market is there at the moment, to be honest. It's my only thing. It's all very well at the government level saying this would be wonderful and talking about 2060. I mean, who knows who'll be in charge then? And you talk about adding another 120 billion to the economy. Okay, that increases the tax revenue a lot and a lot more jobs. But I mean, that is just so oblique and so far off. I mean, it feels very governmenty, this, and doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on the ground, to be honest.
No, and it feels quite noisy. It feels like this is another one of those headline topics. And I'm not sure how that would distill down into, and obviously I want to see more GDP per cap in the UK, but I'm not sure how that would distill down. Or, I mean, I'm sure the environmentalists are going absolutely crazy. I'm sure our commitment to climate and sustainability those things are going to be slightly sideswiped. And Ferds, you live in the west of London. Do you want more planes overhead?
Certainly not, but I don't think I'm hugely at risk from Gatwick or Luton. So I'm all on.
Good NIMBY. You're a good NIMBY. Yeah. Okay.
So we talked a little bit earlier about M&A. It is back. Looking through the figures, so H1 2024 aggregate M&A deal values total 439 billion euros across Europe. So that's a 31% uplift compared to the year prior. But the quantum was up, a bit like VC. The value was up, but the number of deals was slightly down. So that was down by about 10%. So Q4 saw a massive uplift that saw 550, I can't get my words out tonight, 537 M&A deals involving VC-backed startups, which is a 46% increase from the same period last year. So this is good news. So M&A, IPOs, secondaries, lots of liquidity events, lots of stuff going on. I'm always intrigued as to how, if IPOs are coming up and M&A is coming up, where the balancing act is going to be and how startups are going to decide whether they go the distance or whether they sell out along the way. And it also feels like with potentially more regulatory hurdles being removed, this would be a good thing. So M&A 2025 should be looking good mainly for LPs, mainly our investors, to get their money back so that they can keep recycling. But this all feels like good news. Any other thoughts from you, Lomax?
Well, I mean, what I'm seeing on the ground is there is a lot of consolidation within venture-backed companies, but a lot of that is share-for-share deals, right? A lot of that is not involving actually a lot of cash components. I mean, I'm seeing that time and time again. And I mean, there's one venture-backed company in one of our portfolios, which is now in a kind of Russian doll type maneuver, has had its like third share-for-share merger in 4 years. and has effectively now been consolidated into the kind of winner takes all in its market. And so there's a lot of that going on in venture land. So
there's a lot of VC buying other VC product, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I don't think that it's great for LPs, to be honest. Like, there's probably in the wider economy, it sounds like the M&A is up. I mean, is that because organic growth is people are struggling with organic growth and they need to buy growth inorganically? That maybe that's a hypothesis there. But look, I mean, ultimately we're struggling for growth, organic growth in Europe at the moment. So that's what it's all about. That's what the governments need to be trying to foster and engender. And I feel like I'm not seeing a lot of taking it to the venture level and RLPs and us as GPs, etc. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of like venture-backed cash exits at the moment. Like, I mean,
but is that just inertia? It also feels like a lot of the rear view mirror stuff, I think, is right. It's paper for paper. It's not actually super liquidity for RLPs. But it also feels like we're slightly baked in a little bit of inertia. And with Trump's sugar high, with Europe being effectively having sand kicked in its face to kind of get up to speed, and obviously everyone is feeling this nationalism and protectionism push, which I think is going to be a big outcome of Trump's rhetoric. It does feel like that's only ever going to be a good thing for real activity, for real M&A, for real liquidity events for LPs, and obviously much more activity for us. I think my sense is that we've got that kind of sticky inertia bit where everyone's going, bloody hell, what is that bully going to say next? And what's that going to mean for tariffs? And what's that going to mean for our ecosystem? And what's that going to mean for our regulation? So assuming things will start moving, it feels like that's just an inertia period.
Yeah, it's probably not the only source of inertia, right? I think, yes, companies are struggling for growth. And so they're trying to grow inorganically through this sort of acquisition strategy. And there's a lot of movement, as we know, the consolidation with PE to VC, VC to PE, VC to VC. I think there is a bigger problem, which I'm willing to address, even if it doesn't reflect particularly well on Europe, which is that our growth investment landscape and retail market for IPO is just really, really flat, and in very, very difficult for companies to reach the very high bar that exists for those events, for those liquidity events, to be possible. And strategic acquisitions and IPOs they're just a very different beast here to the States. And I think with that bar so high, you have this situation where funds are actually kind of struggling to allocate. And Dan, you and I were listening to research today about the sort of promulgation of zombie funds, right? It's just funds that are sort of biding their time, sitting, waiting for viable avenues to deploy their capital down, because there's just nothing for them to do. So there's quite a lot of that consolidation going, yes, to drive inorganic growth for those companies that might be on the IPO or strategic acquisition trajectory. But there's also quite a lot of funds just sitting on capital because they think things are going to get better.
Yeah, I know I've said this a million times on this pod, but there's a lot of cash has been raised into UK VC in 24. It was the most ever on record. It was just over $12 billion. So it's got to go somewhere at some point. So I personally believe it's inertia, but Lomax, you feel differently?
I don't think it's necessarily inertia. I mean, I do think if you're raising these kind of billion euro venture funds, I sort of struggle to be like, yeah, I mean, maybe that is the point. It's like, how the hell are you going to allocate this sensibly? I mean, what's your target when you raise $1 billion? I mean, $1 billion euro fund. I mean, you should really still be trying to get a 3x net fund.
We do the soft bank, right? So we do a deal every hour. Don't check any. Throw the money out on whatever terms you can get.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, yeah, so there are these, like that, capital has coalesced around what we now call the household names within European venture, right? There's like 4 or 5, but then we talked about them on this podcast before.
Yeah, it's bifurcated, isn't it? Yeah.
It's part of the flight to safety, flight to quality. I mean, I guess we'll see in the returns, but that we've seen in the market. And yeah, maybe they are struggling to deploy, although actually, we'll talk about it later. There have been some pretty big rounds actually already this year in Europe. So,
yes,
long may that continue.
Yeah, no, it has been quite a fruity year. But again, a bit like we were talking about earlier, it's been fewer deals, higher quantum, so much more cash into fewer. So my sense is that there will be a relative reset to that thinking, I hope, where we'll start getting out of that safety net and being a bit more, taking a few more risks slightly lower down the tree is my take. But let's see what 25, I think there's also, maybe there's a little bit of fear that might counter that, but let's see what happens. Lomax, you want to talk about Trump? I don't see how, even though we're kind of European focused, that we can't. But where did you want to start on Trump's first few days?
I think it's hard not to talk about the inauguration, even though we are, focused on this pod about on Europe. And I think the couple of things that like struck with me, one is like when I compare the mindset of what I'm seeing in Europe versus the US. I mean, two absolute extremes. I think in Europe, it's relatively morose. People are, definitely glass half empty. And actually, there's a crisis of confidence as well. It's not just people feeling depressed. I think people are lacking confidence. Whereas in the US, it's the other extreme. But I would say it's like, as you say, sugar high. It's on steroids, and as a couple of examples like struck me, right, in the Trump inauguration, right? So firstly, I think having Larry Ellison on stage talking about, and by the way, obviously like, amazing entrepreneur, like fantastic, one of the best of his generation, but standing up, and this was like almost like drunk on euphoria, talking about sequencing cancers and creating a personalized cancer vaccine within 48 hours robotically. I'm like, I spent a bit of time in this space, right? And I'm like, there's already been, these are not, we talk about non-trivial problems. These are way more than non-trivial problems, right? And we will get to that point, I'm sure, at some point. But this is not the sort of trivialization of it. And a lot of that stuff goes on. Is that how you read it?
I saw it as a sales pitch. I mean, he's in his late 70s, maybe even 80s now.
I just saw it as a bit like, it's more than a sales pitch. It's more than a sales. I thought it was like drunk on euphoria, basically just talking about something that is so complicated and trivializing it to the point where actually it makes the whole thing just seem like a parody, quite frankly.
Yes.
So that was one thing that struck me. And I mean, the Stargate is interesting. I mean, 'cause especially I know you guys talked about it last week. This AI initiative in the UK. I mean, I wasn't with you last week, but I would say that I'm quite skeptical of like government. I think we're all skeptical of like government-led programs, right?
Yes.
So in a way, like at least from the US's point of view, this Stargate project is effectively like in a way it's like it's a private White House adjacent project. I mean, they announced it in the White House and it's great PR. It was funny to see Elon Musk kind of pouring cold water on it very quickly afterwards, which I think, Lee tells you a couple of things. Is like, I think he's right. Like, I think this 500 billion top Fed had a little bit of the whole, Larry Ellison cancer vaccine thing. Like, there's a lot of hot air there,
they don't have
right?
the cash. I mean, it is
they don't have the
public
cash.
knowledge. They don't have the cash.
It is, less probably relevant for Europe, but the kind of, Musk to pour cold water on something that Trump had endorsed so wholeheartedly, like literally 10 minutes later, for me is like, there's going to be like a big falling out there. So,
but Trump, I thought, handled it really well. I mean, Trump came on and said, look, Elon's, got a personal challenge with someone. He kind of brushed it off, but I thought, you know what? At least he fronted it. He did it, which he's good at. I don't like the man at all, but at least he's good at going, look, here's what I think, and I'm a bully, and I'm going to go and crush it, and we're going to win. So at least you know what you're getting. He did front it straight up.
That is very true. But then, like, you look at the Doge executive order, it's very watered down. Vivek Ramaswamy is out of it now. I think if you read the actual terms of the executive order, it talks about improving, the use of software and technology in government, in government services or something. It's nothing like the kind of 2 trillion of cuts that everyone was kind of envisaging. So that's been massively watered down, I feel.
But it is,
like a lot of this stuff. Like,
it is bipartisan, though. There's something I didn't realize. Senator Warren has sent some recommendations. So basically, the Democrats feels like they've got on board to a small degree. Go, look, you're in, it is what it is. Let's get some real stuff done. And they've suggested that, there's a way to get to 2 trillion over a decade in cuts. I mean, to put that in context, the entire American total deficit, I think, is at 32 trillion or something crazy nuts like that. So this is not much over a long period of time, but it is obviously at the point where something has to be done. And who doesn't want a more efficient government? Either side of the Atlantic.
Well, no, I mean, we're not a political podcast, but I would say just like the Democrats do not know where. Well, we are. I mean, and also, and I think, by the way, I think, like, stepping back, like geopolitics, the macro is so important for us at our level. You can never forget that, right? The Democrats don't know where to go with Trump. They're almost like sitting on their hands at the moment. They've got a crisis of confidence. So that, they're a bit European at the moment. They don't know what to do. So actually, and it's hard for them to criticize, like, cutting, making the government more efficient. So in a way, I can see why they're sort of maybe towing the line on that one. But just stepping it back and tying it back to Europe, I think that was my biggest takeaway, is like, hugely buoyant, huge amount of confidence. A lot of it is hot air, but that's fine. Confidence is great for business. Trump's got the political capital now, so he can make all these big pronouncements. Good that he gets on with it. I mean, let's see how things go. Let's see how the first earnings cycle goes, for the public companies in April. And I think, then we'll start to see what really happens. I think some of the heat we talked about on this pod before with Mads is the heat's going to come out of that market, right? And then that'll be a bit of a challenge for Trump. So,
yeah, I think so we've got a little way to go. We were looking at Ferdinand were talking earlier about the value of the Mag 7. So the 7 biggest tech stocks in the US have the equivalent market cap of the stock 600, which is the index of Europe's largest 600 organizations in entirety. So there's such a disparity between what they're doing over there and what we're doing here. It's a little bit nuts. But first, we were talking about this in the truck. Any thoughts from you before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, really just echoing Lomax's thoughts, right? There's been plenty of examples of people being a little bit drunk on euphoria, ranging from the inane to the completely ludicrous in Musk's case. And I think, there is a sense of excitement. Everybody's keen to see, exactly how much of this energy will translate into positive forward motion. But I am legitimately worried for that excitement to dissipate and for reality to kick back in, which I suspect will pose a bit of an existential threat for Trump's administration. But
it's obviously going to be quite a volatile ride. I think I think we're going to see some real. My gut feeling is H1 is going to be bumper and H2 is going to be really volatile. If I was going to put money on the table, that would be my bet. But I wanted to very quickly round off on Doge. Anything more, Lomax, that you wanted to say on Doge? I mean, the one thing I didn't realize, which I read today, was they're looking to make all of these cuts, are putting everything into play by July 26. So this is an 18-month plan, which makes sense because obviously the midterms will probably crush some of this, their ability to take action. So this is 2 trillion over 10 years with all actions put into play by July 26. But anything else that you wanted to round out on with Doge specifically?
No, just I have 2 things to end on Doges. One is, I think the takeaway for me was it's been watered down already. Like, so I think, and like a lot of these things, I think they will probably underdeliver. And so it will slightly end up in the long grass. Secondly is like, well, actually though, notwithstanding that, what does that mean for the UK? What does that mean for Europe? We're talking about the Europe kind of mirroring or following on from the US's lead. What does that mean for us here? I mean, we've had a lot of people talk about that. I mean, clearly Labour are, known for growing the public service sector and not cutting it. So that's, maybe, in a kind of centre-left government, that's not really going to happen. Clearly, if, maybe it's something that, Farage and co campaign on, in the next council, any by-elections, any, obviously the next election, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm sure government productivity, and you layer on what we just talked about with AI, is not going to go away as a talking point in the years to come, right?
Yeah.
Because people will ask more and more, why can't we be using more and more AI? Deficits are becoming more and more of a problem as we've all borrowed so much through COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is not going to be a topic that goes away.
No, and also people I don't think fully appreciate. I mean, the British Business Bank in the UK gets a lot of stick for investing public money into private markets. much of that 32 trillion has gone to that, as in the total deficit in the US. A lot of that in recent years has gone to Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, and effectively propping up private markets in the States. A lot of their growth has come from socialism, as Elon hates and is very comfy taking the checks. So they have borrowed massively to create the wealth and the productivity gains that they have and the market that they have. So we have to keep that in context. I don't think people fully appreciate across Europe how much that debt has created, and there's obviously good and bad debt. So I think we need to be a little bit more bullish, personally. Ferds, anything from you before we move on from Doge? Or you, or Trump, or wherever you want to go with that?
No, I'm aching to move on from both in the most positive
We haven't
way.
talked about Trump, Trump coin. Isn't that just a grift? I mean,
Massive. Disgusting.
ghastly.
I
It's
don't
ghastly,
know
but I
anyone isn't
think-
embarrassed.
Is it not just the apotheosis of all cryptocurrency? Is this not just it entering its sort of boss final stage? If you needed an example of how ludicrous, inane, pathetic, conceptually absurd a cryptocurrency is, there you go, done.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just completely bonkers.
Yeah, I think I'm on exactly the same page. Are you a crypto kid, Lomax? Do you invest in crypto?
Should have asked first.
I do not invest in crypto. I do not. I actually, that's actually not right. I'm an LP, small LP, should I say, in a couple of Web3 and crypto funds. That I'll leave it to the experts.
Web3 blockchain. I'm with you. We've got a couple of blockchain companies in the portco. One big one where it's the core of their offering. But I think the whole crypto coins thing. Let's not go there because I'll get all emotional and then people will shout at me.
I think the sad thing is actually for all the good work that the people who are actually making good progress in this field, and a lot of that is being undermined by this grift basically from Donald Trump. So I feel that the people who've given 10 years, 5 years of their life to this. I mean, it's okay. It's a storm in a teacup. It will be all right in the long term.
You say that, but you say that. One thing that I do fear is the political risk of a country, Russia, North Korea, and other state using the Trump coin as a way of tilting the balance in world order. Because if Russia said, I'm going to buy so many Trump or Melania coins, it just feels like that tokenization, it's an invisible ability to tilt markets and create, I know that Trump is extremely transactional and this is a massive grift, but it feels like with him in power, with so much power in government, let's say Putin wants to do a deal over Ukraine, he just goes and buys $10 billion of Trump coin. That's why it's not
thing.
just a storm. That's why it's scary to me.
It is. It's horrible. It lays him open to huge conflicts of interest. Yeah, but I mean, look, this is a guy that's just pardoned, people who are gouging police officers' eyes out, right? Like, I mean, I'm sorry, like,
it's just not normal, is it? Although I was reading recently about Andrew Jackson and the parallels between, I think he was the 7th president, and how populism isn't a new thing. So this is 200 years ago. All the stories were running in parallel. And then reading about how Biden removed Andrew Jackson's portrait from the Oval Office and Trump has put it back in because he obviously sees him as a hero. And it was really interesting hearing through history the parallels about this kind of populist uprising. And he thought that the election was stolen from him. Was it the Whigs? I forget the exact story. But if you're interested, look up Andrew Jackson and look at the parallels between Trump, the 47th, and Andrew Jackson, the 7th president of the US. Let's move on. So staying US, and we've talked about it a little bit already, but the Stargate AI project is a freaking monster. It is effectively a massive AI infrastructure deal where SoftBank, Microsoft, Oracle, ARM, NVIDIA, all piling in on a $500 billion deal to build data centers, to build compute, to build the connective tissue. So effectively, how I see it is almost like I don't know, the internet or cloud or this mega infrastructure play. The only difference this time is that this only serves effectively OpenAI. This is effectively OpenAI getting on the tip of building their own infrastructure. So I'm not sure how this is going to play out. And obviously Elon is super upset about all this, but this feels, I mean, this is $500 billion. This is a massive mega thing. So Lomax, I know you wanted to talk about this. Where did you want to take it?
Well, no, I just first of all, like, I think actually comparing it to what we talked about last week, or what was talked about here in the UK's UK government's AI push, as I said earlier, I'm always a bit skeptical of government programs or government-led innovation. I think so what's refreshing to see this is it's generally a kind of purely private market-led initiative, right? It all comes into the mix of genuflection from these billionaires, these entrepreneurs to Donald Trump, and people, Trump wanting PR. So I think there's a lot of kind of hot air that sits around it, but the substance of it is pretty impressive if it actually happens. I think
They started in Texas.
It started. I think they have the first, 100 billion. It's a good example. If you're being optimistic and generous about it, you say this is what the US does best. Big, marquee, like well-funded, no, quite frankly, effing about with small amounts of money. And, you always read about these projects in Europe where the headline number is this, but the actual cash number is this. Like, this feels like proper stuff. If the money actually comes through, I mean, there's lots of promises here. I think SoftBank has 30 billion on the balance sheet, and a ton of debt as well.
You can't quite tell, but it looks, if you look around the houses, it looks about 30 billion on the books.
So I think, look, it's in a critical industry. It's what the US needs. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of very serious people who've done a lot of very serious stuff. It has government buy-in. One of the things that the US has suffered from, as well as Europe, is actually the red tape around constructing all of these things and rolling them out and that kind of thing. The speed with which you can do that, I think the Trump administration is very clear. They want to, remove all of that. So there's kind of good alignment between, the public and private sectors here.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sure the IRA and the CHIPS Act will lean in as well. I'm sure there's already some form of opening of the regulatory barriers to allow it from previous acts.
And it's a pretty clear public signal from the states that they are positioning OpenAI as their poster child, and that their expectation is that it will deliver on the promise of AGI. I mean, presumably that is precisely what they are paving the way for, is to enable OpenAI to reach that next level.
That Elon's in the room next door, and Trump has gone with the arch enemy. It just feels this.
Yeah,
feels like this.
Yeah, that is brilliant. That's brilliant, like realpolitik, isn't it? That's brilliant. Just like, I mean, he's managing it like one of the great, I don't know, like Henry IV or something. One of those kings who was really good at managing all of this. Like, he's doing a great job at managing his earls and barons and keeping them on their toes a bit.
I cut you off, dude.
No, I don't think I was teeing myself up to say anything particularly interesting. Only that I was interested to understand what that fallout was, and maybe it is strategic. Maybe it is sort of a bit of gaslighting, and maybe the sort of sub-agenda is let's piss off Elon. So forgive me, let's annoy Elon so much that we, get him to create his own $500 billion facility, because, there aren't that many people in the world that could conceivably come up with a competitor. But
I would love to think that Trump is that strategic. I think Masayoshi from SoftBank basically said, I want to invest 100 billion. The deal was there. And I have no doubt that Trump went, okay, I'll endorse it. I'll own the PR. I'll be the guy that said, I've done the deal. And actually, this is all going on behind the scenes way before him. I'd probably put my money on the table in that camp rather than him being a strategic thinker about inspiring Elon to be the man.
Yeah. And please buy some Trump coin while you're at it, basically.
Yeah.
I do think it was, so just a quick side on, I mean, it is an aside, so forgive me if anybody has anything else interesting on this topic, but very interesting, as we were doing the research for all of this podcast, actually, Dan and I encountered a couple of weird things. The first was that this project, Stargate, is very hard to do research on using LLMs, because it ties back to some obscure CIA classified project
Yes.
from the late 90s, early noughties.
It was supposed to be declassified in 95, but they didn't declassify it. So we were trying to do research on Stargate and the Stargate project. And every time the LLMs that we're using or the search tools we're using, and they just all stuttered.
It didn't just return. I can't give you information on this. It broke the LLM. It couldn't respond.
Yeah.
It didn't know how to balance this desire to promote essentially itself with not being able to present classified information. But the flip side is that we did we're the last people to the party, I think, on this front. We did make use of a very, very powerful tool called Notebook LM, which synthesized a bunch of different, really complicated pieces of analysis. You insert, say, 4 or 5 links. It will go fact-finding not only on those links, but we suspect a little bit beyond them too, and it'll click through to PDFs that are attached in those links. It will then produce a body of analysis, and that analysis is then regurgitated to you in the style of a podcast with 2 hauntingly accurate humanoid voices.
We are
which
definitely
really,
out of business. We are definitely out of a
Dude,
job.
it's game over. I don't know why we're bothering, but it really does sound like 2 slightly annoying nasal American voices having a very real conversation. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. If anybody in the room wants to
Lomax?
swap out.
Okay, Lom.
No, but
No, you must.
I mean, yeah,
You
I've
must.
read about it, so yeah.
We only did it because we were in the car. So because Ferdy was driving and I was typing away. So I thought, how can we both listen to stuff? And I thought, I want to try Notebook LM. We never tried it in anger, and it was like our first one. It was like, oh my goodness.
It was that kind of thing where we were sharing glances every time. So there's some of these little quirks, like sort of they'll make a joke or they'll cut each other off or whatever it is. It's just so human. It's sort of unbelievably human. Dan and I were, it's a bit like that first time you turn on an iPhone, just like, whoa, this is a paradigm shift. It
was very clever. I want to close off now because we're running out of time, but just to talk very quickly about Nico's Series B. So they've raised $260 billion Series B from all of the big names that you can name. And I've done a Nico scan. So Nico is the startup by Daniel Ek of Spotify fame and a couple of other co-founders. And it is the future of healthcare. It is a preventative health scan of your cardiovascular health, skin health, all the blood pressures and other tests. And I know they're going to be coming up with much more clever stuff over the years. And it is absolutely amazing if you get a chance to do it. So Lomax, I don't know, this is another one of yours. I don't know anything else that you wanted to touch on this, but this is a lovely European success. So what else is on your mind?
I'm going to start by being European about it. I'm going to pour some cold water on it. It's like the future of healthcare is a little bit hyperbolic. I'm sorry. Like, okay, this is okay. Now maybe I'm like underplaying the exact plans they have, right? But this is purely basically in screening and preventative and diagnostics, right? Early stage screening, more than diagnostics,
but
actually.
It's
right?
I read it as a slight layer deeper than that, insofar as the science that they're using, as far as they say, and as far as I've read, is that there are markers that even though they might be doing a specific, blood pressure test, that they do this kind of funny scan where they scan the micro veins in your arms. There are all the tests they're doing that sound quite perfunctory and normal and the stuff that we get at our GPs. They have tied together very smart ways of getting early indicators of much more serious conditions. Now, again, I don't know what is BS but my sense is that this is a slightly bigger play than this, what feels like quite a standard set of tests.
And it definitely is. Sorry, I'm just like, don't forget that there's like this whole world of like treatment, there's surgery, there's therapeutics, there's everything like that is still going to be part of healthcare. And, Neko will maybe start to move into that, right? Because at the moment it's only really very early on in its journey and there's nothing precluding that. But I'm just saying, I just want to be careful how excited we get about this, calling it the Apple of healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one thing I think is fascinating about this company is per your point, is the data that it will collect. And not only the data, the static data, the longitudinal data. So if they can actually get, we don't have it where I live, but, if you can go back every 6 months or every 12 months or whatever the thing is, they're going to build up an amazing picture of you over that period, right? In a way that hospital systems have not been able to do over, just because they've obviously have not been, collecting that data in that way. And, they have probably not, their record keeping has not been as good. In a way, like having that data, coming in longitudinally, labeled correctly, like in a way that built from the ground up, like a tech startup, I feel like that is incredibly powerful. So, and part of the reason probably why they're giving it away so cheaply, I should imagine, right? Because I was astounded by.
Yeah, it's quite low cost.
Well, the funny thing is though, Dan, is like I would say it's very, very cheap, but don't forget you're giving them all this data, right? So actually, in a way,
I don't mind being the product. I don't mind being the product.
Absolutely fine, man, because they're doing an amazing service for you. But I would say at the moment it's a healthcare service company. Yeah, that's not a tech company. That's valued at very boring multiples. However, with the data that they're going to get, they will be able to move potentially into, discovering new therapies, new diagnostics.
I have no doubt that's the end point. I have no doubt.
But and what's wonderful about this, which is having started maybe like a little bit, starting less enthusiastic, but
you were the cold water king, and now you're bigging it up.
Yeah, because I don't want to be straightforward on this and just pat ourselves all on the back, or even though I've got nothing to do with this. But I would say what is wonderful about this is they just raised so much money in such a short amount of time.
Second time founder. He's not going to give Daniel Egg money, even though he's hardly involved as far as I can see. He's not going to give him money.
This is an example, actually, of a European project that is following the US playbook, So that is very, very, very exciting. And
it's our own little Stargate, isn't it?
I'll take it.
But
I'll take it.
Yeah,
look, I think the approach, Lomax, just to kind of return to your hypothesis about how it might evolve as a company. The approach really does recall a lot of the sort of preventative maintenance solutions that we see in our slightly less glamorous and certainly less consumer-facing world of like industrial automation technology, where there have been, excited observers, myself one of them, for a long time, hoping for this sort of full factory automation, stitching all of the various bits together with a view then to delivering on the ultimate promise of an automated factory. And actually quite a lot of the businesses that are really well positioned to do that have been doing this very unglamorous, unsexy data collection piece for the last sort of 10, 15 years. And it is a foundational infrastructural level layer that is essential to deliver on the next step. So, I wonder whether Daniel is more involved than he's letting on, and whether he will get increasingly involved as the as that sort of infrastructural data layer becomes a bit more established. It's a very exciting future that they're ushering in.
One thing I would say is that having been investing in healthcare for the last 10 years, is that both in services and tech companies, is that preventative medicine healthcare has been on people have been talking about it for decades. There's the promise of it has always been there. And there was a ton of money that went into startups in the teens into this that actually didn't really succeed, right? Mm-hmm. Because, stuff in healthcare just takes a very, very, timing is important in everything. But I think in healthcare, it takes a very, very, very long time, both for the market norms to change and for startups to actually get traction. So there's kind of a few kind of big structural challenges that, startups on startup timelines have really, really struggled, which is why actually it's great that Neko has managed to raise so much money, go full stack, go direct to the patient. And it does show you that actually, a lot of venture is about execution, but a lot of it is about raising money and timing. And I feel like the timing is right now because we're entering this world of longevity clinics and, Brian Johnson's Netflix series, whatever you may think of him.
He's going to start a movement. He's starting a movement.
And it, it is a little bit kind of 1%y, but it is, hopefully this can be democratized actually, because with what Neko does, that could easily be democratized, right? So yeah. I feel it's very, very exciting. And I
think you're right. Listen, if that was your cold water, I would hate to think about how excited you're going to be with your warm water, because that was like that that was quite a push. I think timing is right. I think this massive AI push. I think there's time in the market. I think they're bang on. So I'm hyper excited, and having used their service, I was blown away. So, gents, we've gone way over. I love you both. I will catch you next week.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thanks very
Bye-bye.
much. See you later. Bye.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.